G'day and welcome to another TeachEDM.com tutorial video. Today we're going to look at looping with a Launchpad. So we'll get stuck in. So the first thing you need to do is make sure you have your Launchpad set up correctly. Now I'm using a Launchpad Mini, and you can get these for around $120 from any music store online, or if you want to contact TeachEDM.com, they'll sort you out. But you can get fancier controllers, but for today we're just going to look at the Launchpad because it's affordable for all schools and very easy to use. So the first thing you want to do is plug it in and set it up as per the setup manual and instructions. So get that done first of all and make sure your Launchpad is working. The next thing we're going to do is arrange our loops. So I'm going to show you how to do that today. If you followed the TeachEDM.com composition course, you would have seen me create this track. Now, this track makes use of groups. So what we're going to do today is export all of our audio in each group, so all the individual audio files in each group, so we can arrange them into loops or cut them up into loops that can be performed live later on. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on my first group, shift click, and click on my bottom group, so synth groups to effects, and I'm going to go File, Export Audio Video, and I'm going to change the rendered track from master to selected tracks only. I'm also going to include return and master effects in there as well, so we get all our reverbs and delays and things like that that happen on each track. Then I'm going to hit export, and I'm going to make a new folder in my music folder just called example, and I'm going to save my audio files in there. Okay, once that's finished, I'm going to make a new Ableton live set. By default, Ableton opens up in the session view, which we will be using later. But first of all, I'm just going to arrange all of our loops, or create all of our loops. So what I'm going to do is press the Tab key, and I'm going to delete these MIDI clips because we don't need them because we're going to be working with audio. And I'm going to find the tracks we just exported, so all the individual tracks, and drag them into the Ableton. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to press the Command key, and what that will do is separate all my tracks into their own individual tracks, like so. Okay, the next thing I want is all of my tracks to sync to the grid. So I'm going to set the tempo of the track to 128, which was the tempo that I created the composition in. And then you'll see all the grid lines in the background line up with different sections of the track. Okay, so most of our composition lines up in 8-bar loops. So what I'm going to do is separate everything by 8 bars or thereabouts into the loop length that I want. So I'm going to press Command E to separate a lot of these tracks at every 8th bar. And I'm going to go through my whole track and separate everything in 8-bar loops so we can arrange them in our session view. Okay, once I've separated my track into the loops I want, I'm going to just go through and delete any of the silences. Okay, now I've trimmed out the silences and I have all of my loops broken up into the sections I want. I'm going to begin transferring them over to the session view. So the way you do that is click and hold on a loop, press the Tab key, and drag it into an empty slot. Now, as I drag these into an empty slot, you'll notice that the corresponding slot on the Launchpad lights up as I let go of the mouse button. And as I add more loops in, you'll notice that more of these lights light up. So now I'm going to transfer all of the individual loops over into the session view so we can perform it on our Launchpad. But what you'll find is if I fill up all these slots, we'll run out of spaces for all the loops. So to do that, we need to right click and click Insert Scene, or press Command I and we can add more scenes for the loops in. So now I'm just going to go through and add all the loops, and we'll come back at the end and show you how to perform our track. Okay, so now I've transferred all of the loops across. I'm going to just go back into this side and delete everything so we don't run into troubles. If you don't delete it from that side, Ableton will play all the audio tracks from the arrangement view and not from your session view. So I just delete them just to be safe, because we now have all of our loops over in this view. Okay, so now you see the yellow box around the clips. So what this basically means is this is what the Launchpad can see. So if you look to the Launchpad now, you can see 5 tracks lit up, and each track goes down 8 rows. Now we're using 9 rows. So if we want to go down and include the loops on the rows on row 9, we have to press the down button on our Launchpad, and you'll see every clip move down, and the yellow box on our screen will change to suit what's happening on the Launchpad. Okay, from here we can begin performing our track. Okay, what happened there is, I guess the loop didn't play back, it didn't loop over itself. So if we want our loops to do that so we can just continue adding things at will, what we need to do is click on each of our loops and hit this warp button here. What this warp button will do is conform everything to the grid, and then we need to hit this loop key here, and this will loop all of our loops. Instead of doing all the tracks individually, I'm just going to click on the top left slot and hold down Shift and click, and that'll select all the tracks. If I press warp on here, it'll turn warp on for all of them, and press loop here. And when we go through, you'll notice that they're all turned on. So you don't have to go through individually, and you can do it separately like that. Okay, because we started before, I'm just going to press this stop button down here, and this turns off all of our loops. Okay, now I'm going to begin performing our track with all the loops enabled and see how it goes. Okay, so what you'll notice is every time I press a button, it waits to the start of the next bar to trigger the new loop. So this is a handy feature that keeps you in time. Okay, so you could go through there and trigger individual loops and start coming up with your own performances from there. One thing to note is if you want to trigger a whole line on your Launchpad, simply click the button to the right hand side of each row, and that'll trigger the whole line, like so. Okay, now I basically just performed everything in order as I wrote things, but you could experiment with this track. So I'm just going to stop all my clips here so they don't play. For example, my track originally starts with the melody, but I might want to start with the drums. So I'm just going to press this button here. And that'll give you different variations of your tracks. So you don't have to perform everything the same way twice. You might want to start with different instruments, or you might feel that a section of the song is going really well with the audience and you want to keep it going longer. You want to go around again, or it's your encore and you want to play your last track a bit longer and hold on. So you don't have to be conformed to what you wrote before. You can actually start taking bits and pieces or adding bits and pieces to your track on the fly. So hopefully that's enough information to help you start looping with Ableton Live. The next thing we're going to look at is performing with a backing track on Ableton Live using a Launchpad in the same way as you would use, say, a MIDI keyboard. All right, so stay tuned for that lesson and have fun performing with Ableton Live.